saws, the better to amputate your limbs with. Georgia's most haunted places.
Don't you love exploring small towns, seeing interesting architecture of old homes and buildings, visiting museums? For me, the most interesting part is learning about people who built and lived in these villages. Today, we are going to explore Madison, population 4,500 in Morgan County, Georgia.
Madison remains much the same as its original January 1809 design. Madison has received many accolades over the years and has definitely been no stranger to media attention. Listed as the #1 small town in America by Travel Holiday magazine, designated by Budget Travel magazine as one of the 16 most picturesque villages in the world, and lauded as one of the 8 great small towns to retire in the USA by Where to Retire magazine.
This house was built in 1809. That's the same year that the town was incorporated. And in fact, on the day that they signed those incorporation papers, they auctioned off lots, and Reuben Rogers stood out there and got this one for $111. Reuben Rogers built the house, and we know his plan was to build a house for his incoming new bride. Well, he took out a marriage license with her name on it, so we assumed they got married, but a year later they were gone. They sold the house for $1,000, moved on somewhere else. You can see we painted our ceiling haint blue, the name of this color. We call it haint blue. A haint is a haunt, or a ghost, or a spirit. You don't want them in your house. Apparently they don't like this color. But people all over the South do that. Early on, people noticed that if they painted their porch ceiling blue, it kept the bugs away. Nobody really understood why, what they think. So we still do it because it's a tradition. Turns out it doesn't work as well as it used to. It turns out that shade of paint used to have a lot of arsenic in it.
Maybe that's why.
Yeah, it was killing the bugs. And probably the people too, but they didn't notice. Look at all of it. But first I want to talk about these 2 pictures. These are not photographs. Of course, we weren't doing color photography in the 1800s, and that's altogether the wrong road. But this is some artist's imagination using a computer of how the house looked when it was first built over here, and then with the addition on the back over there. And notice neither one of those pictures has that front porch you were just standing on. That was not added until the 1870s, and it's in this smaller picture over here. Evidently, it was quite fashionable to have some Oriental influences to show what a worldly person you were, even though you've probably never left the county. Now, this is my favorite piece of furniture. This is called a sugar safe. It's got a lock right here, and the lady of the house would have worn the key around her neck. She'd want to know who's getting in the sugar supply. The sugar looked like this. It came in cones like this, and you can still buy it in this format in a Mexican grocery or an Indian grocery. I saw it at Ingles recently. Do either of you remember the comedy team Laurel and Hardy?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. There's Oliver Hardy in his younger days before he got quite so big. His mother used to operate a hotel just across the street there, and he went to the 1st grade here in Madison, so we claim him. Somewhere there's a key, just a little device you put here on the rope to turn it to tighten the ropes. You need to tighten them every night before you get in bed, pretty much. They're made out of cotton and hemp. They stretch. And if you don't tighten them, you'll be on the floor in the morning in a hammock. But of course, any little bed bugs that are sitting on the ropes, they're going to be disturbed and go ping, 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 and jump off. So sleep tight. Don't let the bed bugs bite. Have you ever heard that?
Of course.
Once or twice. In 1891, Miss Rose borrowed $100 from somebody here in town. That's already remarkable. A black woman's able to get a loan. She paid $50 for the lot that the house was on. She spent the rest of the $100 to build the house. Now we know she had a neighbor who was a carpenter, and we figure he most likely helped her with the construction. We found, as we were getting the house ready to move it, cleaning it up and everything, we found a receipt inside for $11.50, and it's marked for the materials to build the house. And she made her living as a laundress, taking in laundry. I'm talking about in a cauldron over a fire, in a bucket with a scrub board, wring it out, hang it up, take it back down, iron it, fold it, carry it back to them. 50 cents a load. Now 50 cents in their money, that's a lot of money, but that's a lot of work. And a load is not what fits in your washing machine. A load is a family's worth of laundry for the week. So, and she was doing okay. She was well respected in town. People talk about seeing her walking around with her basket on her head. Miss Rose lived here until her death, which was not until 1959. Her daughter lived here with her. Really? She was 96. There are people still alive in town today who knew her well enough to visit her in her home. She made this quilt.
Seriously?
Jesus Saved with a D, that makes it personal.
Wow.
And notice this reversed S. She knows how it's supposed to go. It's deliberate. You always leave a flaw in your handwork because only God can be perfect.
I love it.
Many indigenous cultures as well. Native Americans, Chinese, Africans, the tribes over near Turkey that make the gorgeous rugs. All these indigenous cultures have this custom of leaving a flaw in your handwork so spirit can enter and leave the piece, and because of humility, to acknowledge that only the divine is perfect.
Yeah.
I just discovered this is the fancy kind like they have in the motel where you can flip it over.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Fancy schmancy.
Fancy schmancy is right. Who can tell me what this is for? This is a 4-slice toaster. You lean the bread up against the sides, put it on top of the stove, pretty soon you got toast. Boom.
Genius.
I think so too. People use these for camping still today. This one you fill up with hot coals so you don't have to keep reheating it. Try to lift that.
It's heavy, huh?
It's pretty heavy. But for this, you put a giant block of ice right here, a bucket down here to catch the drips, and the food goes over here. There's a couple of holes to let the air circulate. And it won't freeze your meat, but it will keep your milk from going bad. The ability to make ice, I think, came in the early 1900s. But before that, we would harvest it from the Great Lakes. So up around New York and Canada, and ship it down here on the train, and we'd get some.
What about summer?
A lot of it melted. But you put it all together in a block and cover it with a lot of hay for insulation, and then
And sawdust.
Okay, the house was built in 1811 by Dr. Johnson. He was a physician in town, and then in 30 years later he lived here, and he sold it to his brother-in-law, Dr. Jones. The couple over the buffet are Dr. and Mrs. Jones. The piano is called a coffin piano because you could take the legs off the piano and carry it into your house like a coffin. And you didn't have to pay taxes on it because musical instruments were taxed. So I guess as long as no one realized that nobody had died, you could get away with not paying taxes on your piano. That's interesting. I thought that's one of my favorite interesting things. And this is
I thought you were about to tell me that you actually married people in this.
No, you just didn't want to pay for it. You never have it in your house. This etchings in the window pane are because Dr. Jones had 4 daughters.
Don't worry.
And the daughters, when they would get engagement rings, in order to make sure that they were real, they would take the diamond and etch the pane. So, the people over this couple right here were Mr. and Mrs. Walton, and they were some of the original pioneers to what is now Morgan County. And Walton County's right next door to us, and They were probably among the original founders of Walton County. And Mrs. Manley, over the fireplace in the other room, was a Walton. She was a Walton Reed Manley. She has her little glasses on her head and her Bible, which shows that she could read. And a lot of ladies in that era could not read. So I think they were probably fairly well-to-do. And by pioneers, we don't mean they came in a covered wagon, but that they were just among the earliest people in Morgan County. And this was Dr. Jones's office. This was a medical kit that would be typical of any doctor would have used during that time. You had your saws, better to amputate your limbs with, and you had all kinds of, this was like to screw in your head and let out pressure.
Oh my goodness.
But like 94% of amputees died as soon, because of infection. Joshua Hill, and he was the man who saved Madison from being burned on Sherman's march to the sea. He was Georgia's senator to D.C. when Georgia voted to secede from the Union, and he didn't want him to succeed. He disagreed with it, so he resigned. He came back. He had gone to West Point with Sherman and Robert E. Lee, and he asked Sherman, his son had been fighting for the Confederacy and had been killed, so he petitioned Sherman for the chance to bring his son's body home safely. He was given the permission, and Joshua Hill at the same time probably thought he didn't have anything to lose, just asked him, not to burn his hometown on his march to the sea, and Sherman agreed that they would not burn the houses. Madison has the second number of houses in Georgia next to Savannah. And this is James Madison. He was the president of the United States when Madison was incorporated into a town. So the other gentleman is Daniel Morgan, and he was a general in the American Revolutionary War, and he didn't have any money to pay his officers. So he had been gifted some land in Morgan County, or what became Morgan County, and he gave it to his officers. He divided up into little tracts and gave it to his officers. So that's why we call Morgan County. Is written in Dr. Jones's own handwriting, and it's a prescription for hemorrhoids. And it was sugar, lard, and essential oil, and you took a spoonful of it orally by mouth.
Did it work?
That's what I was.
I don't know. It didn't give us the results.
Probably not.
But notice now that you stepped over on this side of the house, it's definitely more formal. The rooms are bigger. The lady across above the mantel in here was the last actual owner of the house. In fact, all through the house, the keyholes are all covered, so you couldn't peek through or listen. So the gentlemen and the men were over here on this side, you couldn't put your ears.
Yeah.
Well, that would have just made me really want to peek
I
in.
know.
So I would have lifted that and just done it anyway.
And this is Mrs. Manley, and she was the last person to live here, and she was here almost 30 years. And she was a widow. It was considered like the first lady of Madison. She was very gracious. She entertained a lot. But the story goes that she was widowed at a very young age, and she went to Florida to visit with a niece or a cousin or something, and so she had her little parasol out and was taking a walk, and some man kept pursuing her, and he would stop. He had a little driver, and he would stop and want to walk with her, take her out, and she would say, I'm not ready, I'm a widow. But anyway, he was so annoying that she finally just came back to Madison, and then she started getting all these gifts from him, and she would return them. And then she got this. That was a gift. And it has her name on it, plus it must weigh a ton, so it stayed here. I thought of all the gifts she got, that would not be the one I would want to do.
No, it's kind of creepy.
Because you don't know what it is. It looks like an urn.
Yes, it does.
Like maybe you put incense in it. This was called Flopsy Topsy because you go this way, or you can go this way. room is actually on a list of Georgia's most haunted places. But Dr. Jones's oldest daughter died in childbirth in this room. And on the hearth, there's an etching that just appeared out of nowhere. And it's supposed to show, now look at this picture, and then look at the etching, and then you picture all that in your mind, that it's a lady, a woman holding a baby, and someone is at her feet. You know, but a lot of people have reported, you know, even from the outside, seeing things going on that shouldn't be going on. So I guess that's why it's considered the most. Wallpaper in here, and I'm assuming that the other room is the movie The Last Living Confederate Widow Tells All was filmed, and they used these two rooms, and so the wallpaper was put up then.
Until she was too old that she could go.
Make sure to visit one of the many antique stores in Madison. This one is in downtown and it's almost 12,000 square feet. It could take hours to see every item in the store. Madison is a charming little town, rich in history, with mild southern climate and warm people. I would highly recommend it for a day-long or even longer visit. Between the old homes, museums, restaurants, antique shops, and ghost stories, I'm sure that you're not going to be bored. Its future depends on its past, and I'm glad that they are preserving the memory of people who lived here.